Coming up next, will it be the best of podcasts or the worst of podcasts? Hey everybody, welcome to the show.
You're right, that was better.
Yeah. I made us redo the intro so that I could do that intro. Because I thought that intro
totally worth it.
Was better than the intro that I did first. Which
better.
Which was something like, coming up next, the Bookening discusses Tale of Two Cities. But I know you want a little bit more bang for your buck. And speaking of bang, the sun is beating down. It's very hot.
Call back.
I've got my gun.
The Bookening died yesterday.
The beach is all around me. Time is standing still. I'm going to shoot Brandon 5 times in the fat.
Thankfully, there's enough that didn't.
Wait, what's going on here?
Your fat just absorbed the bullets. The bullets traveled very slowly. I fired all 5 of them, and then they kind of like Matrix bullets.
Yeah, it is disgusting watching me move like in Matrix slow motion. It's like
bullet time jiggling.
Yeah, bullet time.
BTJ, we call it.
Bullet time jiggling. Bullet time jiggler.
He's full time.
BTJ.
A lot of BTJ on this podcast. Hey, folks.
Isn't that no, it's BTK.
What's BTK?
BTK killer.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks for bringing him up, Brandon.
You're welcome, Nathan.
Hey, speaking of Nathan and Brandon, my name is Nathan. I'm your humble and obedient host. That's Brandon. He's the scholar who's a baller. Books. Notice how I've gotten it right twice in a row.
Nice, Nathan.
I deserve to be commended when I do the least amount of things that I already should do. And Brandon?
Yeah.
There's another gentleman here. He's wearing the hat.
There is.
He's wearing the gray hoodie.
There is.
He's wearing the jeans.
Maybe, I don't know. I can't see beneath the table, and I'm not going to bend over and take a look. Oh, there they are.
Yep, Jake just lifted his leg.
There's the jeans.
Yeah, there's the jeans. He's wearing the jeans. He's wearing the gray hoodie, the black t-shirt, the headphones. He's got the beard. He
does have the beard.
Yeah. Brandon, who is this gentleman? I already said his name, but
I don't know. Who is it?
I'm not going to say
What
it.
gentleman?
The gentleman with the beard and the jeans and stuff.
Who's on first?
Until you acknowledge that
second?
I'm also wearing a ball cap.
Didn't I say cap?
No.
I said you're wearing the hat.
With an LS on it.
You said headphones.
Probably for Los Salvador.
Los Salvador. Jake is a huge fan of Los Salvador.
Yep. LST.
Mm-hmm.
I'm repping the
Latter-day Saints Temple?
Yeah, LST stands for Latter-day Saints.
Latter Saints Temple.
Evansville made LST warships for World War II. We have one docked in our harbor.
Warships. My brain turned it into worships.
In Jake's harbor, too. Not just Evan. Jake has his own harbor.
Right. Well, there's a harbor in his heart. And a warship is always parked in the harbor of Jake's heart.
Or it's STL for St. Louis.
Oh. Is that what it is?
I mean, it could be.
Could be.
Could be I'm a Cardinals fan. I don't know.
We've propagated many theories. Who knows which one is right or wrong?
It is a black hat, so it's not like you know what color the Cardinals are, if that's the case.
No, this is a stylized kind of thing.
For when all the Cardinals die.
Spoken like a true...
you guys wouldn't get it, okay?
No,
is it like the
clearly we don't.
Is it like the blackout thing for the Cardinals? People don't think they're getting paid enough or something?
Right, yeah, you got it.
Oh, I get it now.
Yeah, that's it. Nailed it.
Yep.
What do you think of that new USFL? We all excited for that?
No.
I know US stands for United States.
We watched it the first week because my son Jack's really into it. And we thought it was hilarious when we saw like 5 people in the stands.
What is USFL? I don't even know.
It's the US Football League. It's just an off-season sort of...
Oh, yeah. I guess maybe I've heard
amateur,
a sprinkling of this.
Silly.
Speaking of amateur and silly, it's amateur and silly for us to still not have introduced the man in the cap.
His initials are JK, like just kidding. So I guess it's not too amateur, silly. He's got an amateurish and silly initials.
Yeah. The logic checks out.
It says the guy whose initials are BS.
Oh, right. Who's that?
My initials are just nah.
It's J.K. Menzel, Jacob Kyle Menzel,
Got me.
the pastor who is a master of reading.
Who is better, J.K. Simmons or J.K. Menzel?
Ooh. It's really fun thinking of J.K. Menzel in that role from Spider-Man.
It's really fun thinking of Jake.
I guess it's kind of his role as like he's the CEO of Warhorn.
Mm-hmm. He does always, he just
I chomp on my cigar.
So he's always
yell at
trying to
people.
find that Spider-Man.
Yep. Yeah. He's incredibly obsessed with this character that he doesn't seem to care that much about.
How about J.K. Menzel or J.K. Rowling?
Well, you're both TERFs.
It's true.
Well, no, you're not really a TERF.
No, not really.
You're not a trans-exclusionary radical feminist.
No, I'm not. I'm just
You're
a regular
a trans-exclusionary radical misogynist. You're a term, I guess.
He's a radical dude, so he's a turd.
Turd, yeah. Well, actually, he is, because he's not exclusionary. So he's trans...
Unitary.
Radical...
Dude.
Misogynist. Dude, yeah, he's a turd. I didn't care for that at all. Don't care for that word. Many words better than that word to describe that substance. All of them unpleasant. Unpleasant substance.
Remember that George W. Bush used to call, was it Dick Cheney was Turd Blossom?
Yes, I do. I do remember that.
Oh, Turd Blossom.
I've been waiting for that to come up on the show.
Guys, this is a great opening. I don't think we've had this good of an opening in a long time.
Oh, no. Well, I think the new listeners are all gone, so we can talk about...
It's not like we were getting any new listeners for Dickens. Who listens for Dickens?
Who listens for Dickens? The age-old question. Now, guys, we are here for is this round 3 of Charles Dickens on the Bookening?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it is. This is round trace. We are doing Charles Dickens. Yeah, I ran out of words. We did Christmas Carol.
Yep.
We all liked Christmas Carol.
Yep.
We did Bleak House.
We all loved
An
Bleak
easy and
House.
accessible introduction to Dickens.
And one of like 2 books I did not finish.
Well, you can't read everything, Jake. And Bleak House is pretty long.
I just did not like that
Pretty
book.
bleak and pretty
I'll
paid
retell.
by
I guess
the...
I should tell this. We'll just wait for baggage check.
Yeah, we will. Well, in any case, me and Jake thought, we're not happy with this. We want Jake to buy some tickets for the Charles Dickens Express.
Yeah.
And how do we get him to do that? How do we get him to jump on that train? We did not know, and we thought, do we do David Copperfield? Do we do the Old Curiosity Shop? Do we do Adam Drudge? Not Adam Drudge.
Barnaby Rudge.
Barnaby Rudge. Yeah, same thing. What do we do? And finally, Brandon, what did we decide?
We decided on A Tale of Two Cities.
Yep, A Tale of Two Cities. Not to be accused with the Bill Murray classic Garfield 2, A Tale of Two Kitties, the second in the Garfield franchise. We decided on Tale of Two Cities.
We sure did.
A novel that is known to be atypical, to contain relatively little of Dickens' clowning around that he liked to do, and relatively little of his over-the-top characterizations, and just kind of known as something of a historical thriller, a slam-bang thrill ride. We thought if Jake's going to hop on the Dickens train at any point, old Tales of Two Cities Junction might be the place. And today, folks, we find out whether me and Brandon's surmise became reality. I mean, it became reality in the sense that Jake read it, but did he enjoy it as we suspected he might?
That is the question.
We had, I dare say, great expectations for this book.
We sure did.
For our mutual friend, Jake.
Yes.
Can we keep it going?
It'd be a real Oliver twist if Jake didn't like this book.
We wondered
It's
if he
looking
was going to
really
get
bleak right now.
in the house. We wondered if he was going to give this book some hard times.
At Ridgemont High.
Yeah. Or we wondered if he was going to be like that famous magician David Copperfield and pull a fast one on us.
Yeah.
I wish I could
that's just what we said.
disappear this entire conversation along with Dickens' oeuvre.
Yeah.
We're pretty old, and we had a lot of curiosity.
Yeah.
And we had this conversation in a shop.
We did. I was wondering if he was drinking any Oliver wine when he got to the twist.
Mm-hmm.
He already did Oliver Twist while you were looking up other titles.
Brandon,
That's not what I'm doing.
Are you going off of a list? I'm going off of my head here.
Oh, off of your head.
Off of my head. A zombie.
No, I'm pulling up Wikipedia. That way I'm ready for...
For context.
No, listen.
You famously pull all your context from Wikipedia.
Brandon is well known for just reading Wikipedia straight up. Okay, guys.
I go to bed reading Wikipedia.
Yeah. I wake up reading Wikipedia. It's weird. You go to bed reading an article in Wikipedia, and I wake up reading the same article.
What's even weirder is you wake up because I call you to read it to you.
Yeah, that's pretty weird. Nathan, did you know the history of lug nuts? No, but I'm glad you called me.
Let me read to you the history of lug nuts.
Well, speaking of lug nuts.
Nothing Nathan would rather hear Brandon talk about more early in the morning than
the history of lug nuts.
Yeah.
I hear a sound. What's that sound? It's the sound of the guns going off, indicating the contextual Texan part of the show, where Brandon, who is from Texas, gives us some much needed context on this work. The work in question being A Tale of Two Cities by none other than Charlie D. himself. Brandon, take us to Context Town, my friend. Let's get on the context train. Choo choo. Chugga, 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 chugga.
Is Charles Dickens not the captain, the engineer of this train, the conductor?
The conductor.
Is he?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, he's kind of like Tom Hanks in that Christmas movie. He's all the characters.
Yes.
He's going to give us some hot chocolate here pretty soon.
Yep. But you're going to give us the hot chocolate of context.
I guess.
With the marshmallows of great insight.
Yeah, we have done contexts on Charles Dickens before.
It's true.
So he's in one of those categories of authors that we've talked about plenty of times on this show.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't people just go and listen to those episodes?
Yeah.
I don't have to do it again.
Lazy jerks.
Yeah.
Brandon wants to be the one that's lazy.
So we'll give them a few minutes. You go listen. Okay. And then we'll continue with our discussion. Sound good, guys?
Sounds great.
Sure.
No, okay. So this puts us in... This book was published in 1859, which puts us just a few years after the next book I think we're talking about, which is Moby Dick.
Moby Dick.
They are in the same...
A superior book.
The same era.
In all respects.
All right.
Every single
You're
respect.
right about that, Jake. You're right about that.
Does
Thanks.
Moby Dick evoke the French Revolution better than Tale of Two Cities?
Yes.
Yeah, probably. It almost certainly does somewhere or other.
It evokes everything in its entirety. It contains
The whale
all
is
things.
everything.
Yeah, the
The
novel
whiteness
is
of the whale contains all things.
about meaning itself. Man, what a book, what a book.
What a book.
By the philosopher, artist, king of them all,
Yeah,
Melville.
but we're not talking about him.
No, we're talking about the philosopher.
We're talking
Dorcas.
about... Yeah. This is more like the Barnum.
Mhm.
Barnum and Bailey, that guy.
Yeah.
Right.
The Greatest Showman.
He's the greatest showman. He falls into that camp.
Whoa, whoa.
Oh,
Ladies and gentlemen, something bigger.
5 bullets, hot sun, ready, go.
That's your hot son, is that movie?
I'm just going to kill Nathan for reference.
I mean, when...
I don't know why.
We got to get this out quickly. When
Bang,
when-
bang, 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 bang.
He's dead. Wow, people.
When Hugh Jackman's parents had their kid, they had a hot son.
That's kind of gay.
That is kind of gay.
No, I'm just saying objectively, Hugh Jackman, well known to be an attractive man.
Is that right, Nathan?
Yes.
Oh. Well, I'm not going to say that. I don't think about men. Like, apparently.
I don't know. I don't either, but I'm aware of what people say. I hear scuttlebutt.
You know what else people say?
What do they say?
That Charles Dickens was born during the Victorian age.
Do they say that?
They say that. And you know what? People who say that are right. They're right.
What do you mean now?
Much like Charles Dickens liked to write.
Those people are also very good. Right.
Right.
I got it.
And speaking of people, Charles Dickens
We're people.
was a person. Yeah.
And we read him.
Yes.
It's all coming together, guys.
And speaking of red, blood is red.
Uh-oh.
And this book's full of blood.
Speaking of blood,
Wine.
I
That
have
makes
a
me
gun,
thirsty.
And I'm going to shoot Nathan again.
Do it.
Bang, 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 bang.
Man, it is riddled full of holes.
I
You
don't
know what
think
else
Jake
is
really
riddled
shot me.
full of holes?
Yeah.
Some of Charles Dickens' plots.
You don't say.
Well,
This might be my most favorite way we've ever done context. Let's keep it going.
We're just going to do a Nathanic stream of consciousness.
Speaking of,
That's not what the people paid for.
Stargazing conditions tonight will be good, according to my phone. I have a...
what time's the moon rise?
It doesn't tell me that. That does matter. We missed the meteor shower recently because the moon was up in the middle of the sky. You couldn't see the meteors.
Boo.
Too bad, the Lyrids. Isn't that sad?
Yeah, it is sad.
You know who else was associated with astronomy? Charles Dickens' birth. He was born in 1812, the passing of the great comet.
Yeah.
I'm getting
Mark
an inordinate
Twain as
amount
well,
of
right?
Twain.
I'm getting a big amount of pleasure out of the fact that you said who, as if Charles Dickens' birth was a person. But anyway, I can't translate that into entertainment for our listeners, but I just wanted people to know I was entertained.
For those who are as discerning as Nathan, are cracking up.
Oh, you're in luck tonight. Moonrise is at 4:40
Oh, sweet.
a.m.
We'll go outside and watch some stars.
Charles Dickens was kind of a star of his era.
He was, and he was born under the Great Comet. Brought him in, as Jake said, Mark Twain as well. He rode in on the comet and rode out on the comet.
Mm-hmm.
That's Mark Twain's famous quote. But a lot of famous people were born in that year, and people think it was because of the comet passing over. Astrologists.
Do you think it's because people got up to see the comet and then... No, I guess that would have been the year before. Do you think it's because people woke up a year too early to see the comet, were bored, made love to their spouses?
Like, what else are we going to do?
And then we literally have nothing else to do. And then they had babies 9 months later?
I think that's probably what happened, Nathan.
One time somebody was telling me about the concept of flipper babies, which apparently are babies with this deformity that makes them look like they have fins. But before they defined the term...
Seen Batman Returns?
Yes, there are flipper babies in that. Well, Oswald Cobblepot. But before the person defined the term, my brain assumed that flipper babies were babies that happened when the show Flipper went off the air, and people did not have anything to do that night because Flipper wasn't showing.
Flipper's not a baby.
Because there's lots of stories like that. I mean, what's one of the actual famous ones? I guess there's pandemic babies. People like to talk about that now, But
actually, apparently, the pandemic did not lead to the baby boom that they thought it would.
Yeah, well, people are dumb.
The people thought that in the first place, or the people didn't have babies because of the pandemic?
Both.
Both.
I think both.
People should have had more babies, and people should have predicted it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't.
Yeah, apparently testosterone levels are really low and all that jazz, and people just aren't out for making babies like they used to be.
Yeah, well, not everybody can have the high T levels of the Bookening.
The average, since the 1980s, the average testosterone level of the American male has dropped by 1% every year.
Yikes.
So we have a 40% drop since the 80s.
So we will all be women by 2080, I guess.
Something like that, yeah.
Is that why all the stars that all the girls like nowadays look like girls?
Yes.
Yeah, that explains the rise of Harry Styles and the rise of, what's that stupid comedian that I hate, that everybody hates? Kim Kardashian's latest beau. What's his name?
Oh, yeah.
That guy's
That guy.
disgusting.
That guy's annoying. Pete Davidson.
Gross, yep.
All right. Anyway.
Well, you know who looked really manly? Charles Dickens.
Yeah, he had like a bushy kind of haircut, didn't he?
He looks about like what you would expect him to look like, actually. Or like maybe a Civil War general or Colonel Sanders.
He looks like a avuncular, charismatic poet kind of dude.
About what you would expect him to look like, right?
Yeah.
So Charles Dickens, his story is pretty much part of literary lore at this point. Almost everybody knows Charles Dickens' story. He was born... I think the only thing that people mainly get wrong is people think that he was born into poverty. Mm-hmm. Actually, what happened, he was born to a father who was pretty irresponsible and got them into poverty because he went into debtor's prison. And because of that, he was sent to the blacking shops, which are like the canning shops that you can read about. And David Copperfield, Oliver Twist has some elements of that as well.
I think that's a really important distinction, though, because it means Dickens in his early life already had more multifaceted perspective of different classes and different lives, and was able to maybe see things about poverty that someone who was just born into it and it was always the air they breathed wouldn't be able to see.
Yeah. So his father was actually a clerk in the Navy, and so they had a fairly comfortable existence. In fact, if you can, here you go. This is Charles Dickens' birthplace. This definitely does not look like the place a boy would have been born into who was poverty-stricken.
Yeah, it's like a nice red brick
Yeah.
house, folks.
So typical London house that you would expect to see.
Kind of looks like the Banks house in Mary Poppins, if you want something to imagine.
Yeah, that actually it does look a lot like that. And so anyways, so he had a fairly happy childhood. His early life, he was able to spend outdoors. So they weren't, even though that he was born in London and lived for a time in London, his childhood was actually more similar to, if you guys read Oliver Twist, when he goes and stays with the doctor or whatever that character
like
is.
After he gets saved from poverty the first time.
Yep. So his early childhood would have been more like that. He was able to go out into the countryside. He was able to do these things, frolic like a little boy should.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's the other perception people have of Dickens, is they associate him with London in the same sense that we associate like Faulkner with Yoknatawpha County. We think that's
the first thing that I always think of when you say Faulkner. I think Yoknatawpha County.
Right.
Well, I'm glad.
Or when I just think of things that are associated with things, the comparison that always comes to mind is
Faulkner and Yoknatawpha County.
Like Cormac McCarthy in Texas. Like
there you go.
Peas and carrots.
Like peas with carrots. Like Stephen King with Maine. Like Ray Bradbury with Illinois. Like
Fun with caves.
Like dank horror with dying in a cave.
Yeah. Anyways, so what was I saying? People associate him with London, but actually, and so if you read his other books, there are senses of the open countryside, senses of these other things that he's in. What he had a broader scope to his existence than just the city, and he also had a broader scope to his existence than just poverty. So he had these other experiences, and yet it was the later things when he did end up back in London, and when his father did go to debtor's prison, that, as should have, because they were kind of in his middle school age of life, is when these things would have happened. Scarred his psyche, because one of the things that happened is his dad apparently got money to get out of prison, and yet it took him a little while to go and get poor little Charlie Dickens out. He just kind of let him stay there for a while. And so, his father wasn't the greatest person, and his father is one of the inspirations for some of his more sour characters. Like if you've read David Copperfield, Mr. Murdstone, and these kind of characters are loosely based on his dad. But one of the things that this also gave him was a direct experience with debtors' prisons. And we see that here with Tale of Two Cities. It's not a debtor's prison per se, but the dad is put into a prison. And so Dickens would have had this sort of visceral connection to...
He has a good line with people visiting people in dank prisons and just the experience of being in a cell or of visiting someone.
Yep. And so it was during this time... So actually, he was sent off to board with a woman. What was her name? Elizabeth Roylance, a family friend. And if you've read David Copperfield, right?
Yes.
So would be the inspiration for Betsy Trotwood.
Right. The Maggie Smith character in the movie.
But anyways, eventually, because of his parents' position, while he was here, he had to leave school and work 10-hour days at what's called a blacking warehouse. And here's a quote here. This is from the life of Charles Dickens. The blacking warehouse was the last house on the left-hand side of the way at Old Hungerford Stairs. It was a crazy, tumble-down old house abutting of course on the river and literally overrun with rats. Its wainscoted rooms and its rotten floors and staircase and the old gray rats swarming down in the cellars and the sound of their squeaking and scuffling coming up the stairs at all times, and the dirt and decay of the place rise up visibly before me as if I were there again. The counting house was on the first floor, looking over the coal barges in the river. There was a recess in it, in which I was to sit and work. My work was to cover the pots of paste blacking, first with a piece of oil paper, and then with a piece of blue paper, and he did this for 10 hours a day. To tie them round with a string, and then to clip the paper close and neat, all round until it looked as smart as a pot of ointment from an apothecary's shop. When a certain number of grosses of pots had attained this pitch of perfection, I was to paste on each a printed label, and then go on with more pots. And of course, this was the inspiration for Oliver Twist.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
But you see this sort of poverty in Tale of Two Cities as well, right?
Yep.
But either way, what I think is important is to realize is that Dickens, as a child, had a wide and a vast array of experiences that would work to create who he became. Yeah, and so this period of his life, it would stick with him and it would sour a lot of his later views of things. Apparently his mother was pretty instrumental in choosing not to take him out at first. And he didn't have the greatest parents. And so his youth, his later youth, and then his early adulthood was just marked by sort of rags to riches, pull yourself up by the bootstraps sort of story. And again, this is all fairly common knowledge. Dickens' life is, I think, pretty well known to even people who don't love literature, right? It's just something that people know about, is his story.
It's one of those things that corresponds nicely enough with who he became and what he's known for.
Yeah, and so especially this poverty, but again, what I really want to stress here is that his whole childhood was not just poverty and misery. And he's not just associated with London. This just became what, again, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Hemingway, part of the myth-making, part of what Dickens would do later on in his life. He would really stress these things, and these would become what we know him for. But this wasn't all there was to him. In fact, his life and his childhood was much broader than that. He lived in Marshalsea. He saw the ocean and got to go to the beach and travel and see all these other things that maybe he didn't do it extensively, but enough that he got a feel for what England was like and could write about it. And you see that in some of his other books, like Old Curiosity Shop, when they're wandering around the English countryside. He's not just making these things up. He actually saw these things directly and had these experiences. He did clerk for a while at Gray's Inn, and his experiences there, of course, famously get immortalized in the opening chapters to Bleak House, because he would have been a part of the court system there, and he just came to hate the British court system. And we see it, of course, in Tale of Two Cities as well, with
Charles Darnay being on trial.
With Charles Darnay being on trial, but even more than that, who's the main character that comes in?
Sidney Carton?
No. Laurie, manager at Tellson's Bank. So he associates the bank and the law firms kind of together, right? But Laurie actually is one of the heroes of the story.
Right.
But it's despite the sort of bureaucracy and just staid, inhumane machinery of what he would see as the legal and banking system of England. He just absolutely hated those things. And both of those experiences came from his work as a clerk in these law offices. It was during this period that he also began to write. He wrote for some newspapers. He would write sketches of London life and was a journalist for a while, as many of the famous writers that we've seen started out as journalists. And it would be his first collection of vignettes that was known as Sketches by Boz, which was his nickname at the time, that would make him famous. And he actually rose to stardom pretty quickly. He wrote Sketches by Boz, then he wrote, after that, the Pickwick Papers, and really the rest is kind of history. After those books, let's see, we can just, he's one of the few authors who has such a prolific output, and yet we probably know most of everything he wrote. You probably heard of all. It was the Pickwick Papers, and then Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, Old Curiosity Shop, Barnaby Rudge, Christmas Carol, Martin Chuzzlewit, The Chimes, The Cricket on the Hearth, The Battle of Life, then Dombey and Son, then The Haunted Man. And so by this time, we're at 1848 when he wrote these, and when we get into his 1850s, which is kind of his heyday when he writes his big works. Mm-hmm. But already, that's a pretty impressive list. And he's, at this point, a celebrity. He's traveling to America. He's reading his books on stages to people. In fact, that's how he would die, is he would get sick while on tour doing one of these things. And he became a real celebrity in Victorian England, a widely known figure. And it would be in the 1850s that we get David Copperfield, which is kind of his reminiscence back on his life. And then after that, we get Bleak House. Then we get Hard Times, Little Dorrit, and it's A Tale of Two Cities, which is one of his last books. So A Tale of Two Cities was published in 1859. And then we get his last few books which is Great Expectations, Our Mutual Friend, and then Edwin Drood, which is his unfinished book. So Tale of Two Cities actually comes fairly late in Dickens' oeuvre. And it's at the height.
It took him that long to write something decent.
Yeah, to just figure it out. I think you're going to like David Copperfield, actually, if you liked Tale of Two Cities. But who knows if we'll ever get to that one.
Who knows whether Jake liked Tale of Two Cities?
That's true. Who knows?
Who knows?
The suspense is killing me.
So a couple things to just keep in mind about the way that he wrote and the way that novels at the time were published is most novels were published in serial form in magazines or journals. And so most of his books would have been published serially. And so if you feel like his books kind of go up and down, kind of like a roller coaster, part of it was so that you could get the people interested in what was coming next. That was just built into the system. You see this in lots of novels from this period. Fenimore Cooper's pretty notorious for it. But you get what's called the cliffhanger. And Dickens has lots of cliffhangers, and you see them all over Tale of Two Cities. And so when we get to the gnarly cave of twists and turns, or whatever it is, when we get there are lots of twists and turns to talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah. Dickens was the man for whom that category was invented, I dare say.
And he was very theatrical, and he was very dense with not dense with his language, but his language was meant to entertain. And it's very Victorian in that sense as well. And so there's a lot of flourishes and a lot of words. There is the myth that he was paid by the word, which is kind of a myth. It's not really true. He was paid by the serial publication.
I think even less of him now.
Yeah, but it wasn't that he...
No, he made it. He just made a choice to be that way.
He just made a choice to be that wordy. But yeah, that is another myth we can dispel. But he did, as he grew older, fall in love with London, with the city. And he was known to go out on long walks and just go randomly from house to house, even into the poor towns. And he would take like 3 or 4 hour walks through the city and just meet people and talk to people. He was vivacious and friendly. He would throw amazing Christmas parties, apparently. And his home life was kind of happy. Have you guys seen the movie about him and the Christmas Carol one with Chris Plummer playing Scrooge?
Oh, with the guy from Downton Abbey and Legion and stuff like that, Dan Stevens. No.
Yeah, it tries to portray what his life was like, but it gives him a little bit too much of a happy spin.
Do you have tall, pointy ears like this? And chop out a carrot like this?
No.
He give you a kiss like this and say, "What's up, Doc?"
No.
Never heard of him.
Oh, well, there we go.
All my best material I steal from Bugs Bunny.
Anyways, this is interesting because later in life, it's not interesting, it's sad. He ended up having a platonic affair, is the way that most people... He committed adultery, emotional adultery, with a girl, a young actress, an 18-year-old actress, who then makes an appearance as characters in multiple of his books. She is Agnes in David Copperfield, for sure, the girl that he wishes he could have had. And she is, most people think, the inspiration for Lucy in this book. Lucy looks like her in her description and apparently acts like her.
The very model of feminine glory.
And so he liked to glorify this particular relationship by writing her into his stories.
Good man.
Yeah. He was also known for... Dickens was fascinated by kind of paranormal stuff as well. And one of the things that really fascinated him at the time that he created Tale of Two Cities was apparently the Doppelganger Effect. And so that also makes an appearance here with Sidney Carton and Charles Darnay.
We should say everybody was fascinated by paranormal stuff at the time. Yeah. It was just really big in the Victorian era.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about Sherlock Holmes, that's another thing. I mean, Conan Doyle was obsessed with that sort of
Absolutely.
stuff. In fact, some young girls got him to believe that fairies existed.
The Cottingswood fairies, yeah. Conan Doyle fell for a famous hoax where they just took pictures of little fake fairies, and Conan Doyle propagated it to the world like an idiot. Not Sherlock Holmes. We'll talk about it.
Yeah. So thematically, the things that are important across the Dickensian oeuvre. Oh my goodness. Across all the books that Dickens wrote.
Thematically, the things that are important across the Dickensian oeuvre.
Thank you. I'm glad that you put that into that voice, because that's how I felt. Are caricaturized people. Some people hate him for it, some people love him for it. In this book, you really don't see it quite as much. I would argue you see it with Lucy, because she is more of a caricature than a person.
Yeah, Jerry Cruncher, I'd say.
And then you say Jerry Cruncher, yeah. Those are the two for this book. Otherwise, this book is fairly tame on its caricatures. But there is a reason that when someone says the word Dickensian, what you're thinking of is kind of a cartoonish cast of characters. That he'll hone in on one thing. And so this is like all over David Copperfield.
Also give them awesome names.
Yeah, so Uriah Heep's known for his slimy hands and his smarmy ways. And then you have all these other, like Traddles can't keep his hair down and stuff. So there's just these...
Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yeah. Let's see. Apparently Oscar Wilde hated him. Thought he was too sentimental.
What a shocker.
G.K. Chesterton loved him.
Also a shocker.
And also Nabokov, who we often talk about his opinion on things for some reason.
He had very good opinions, that's why.
He liked Dickens.
Yeah.
So, but he did not like him nearly as much as Tolstoy, so Tolstoy was his hero. So we should just have Nabokov come in here and do context for us.
Yeah.
That would probably help.
Too busy catching butterflies, probably.
Yeah, that would probably help the ratings of the show if we had Nabokov come in for all sorts of reasons, because he's been dead for a long time.
Yep, and he wrote a book about pedophilia, so...
We could get a Ouija board and I could try to channel him.
That'd be fun. Nah, let's not.
I have to burn you at the stake, sorry.
Yep. Yeah. Let's not burn Brandon at the stake. Let's not channel Nabokov.
Anyways, yeah, context, fun stuff. Oh, the other stuff he talks about is with Dickens... Place is very much a part of those stories that he writes. And so London, famously, is a character in most of his books. It is one of the cities in this book, and it is very much part of it. And he has a love-hate relationship with the city. He loves a lot of what London has to offer, he loves, but also he is good at showing the seedy element to it. Kind of like that guy who wrote The Wire, who loves Baltimore, but also hates Baltimore, right?
Like Scorsese in New York.
Yeah. But I would say that Dickens is pretty good at evoking a sense of place. And
he has defined London in the popular imagination of that era. And if we think of Victorian London, we think of what Dickens described for us. It's just absolutely inescapable.
And he was able to take this city and make a whole universe out of it.
Yeah.
And in this book, maybe one of the flaws is that Paris feels a lot like London. But still... Paris, that was one of his points, is that they basically were a lot like each other. That the corruptions that the British want to read into the French Revolution were a part of the way that the British treated their own subjects. Their own subjects just didn't happen to decide to cut everybody's head off. So I don't think we need any background of the French Revolution to understand this book. It's a thing that happened.
It is a thing that happened. I noticed
that. It would have been an event that was well before Dickens was, well, not well before he was born. What about 20 years before he was born? But at this point was pretty far in the past, but still a part of the popular imagination.
The way that I think of something like Woodstock or the Sexual Revolution, it's like right before my time, but it seems to have defined everything that came after.
Yep. And so this is him trying to come into terms with it, make sense of it, and also write a great story with a central love story for the ages. So,
a central love story for the ages.
Yeah. So the last thing to really talk about, because you see it with this book, is the accusation of Dickens being a sentimental. Oscar Wilde accused him of being sentimental, and what that means is someone who uses the elements of their story, either the way they tell the story by being overly emotive with their metaphors and like having ohs and ahs and things like that. One of the things I remember is in Bleak House, where Dickens starts to recite the Lord's Prayer as a character is dying.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, he'll say, "Thy will be," and then the character, "Breathe this last, be done."
The thing I always think of is the rhapsodies he goes into after Tiny Tim has died.
Yeah.
"Oh, Tim," this is just the narrator talking. "Oh, Tim, thy angel smiles down upon us. Wouldst that thou could be here now in thine..." It's actually thine heavenly attributes were too much for this world, and thou hast been taken to thy creator's bosom, or some crap like that.
Yeah.
And I think it really does use these and thous, and it's just obnoxious as heck.
Yep. So I think that the accusations of him being sentimental, they're true. He was sentimental. And you just have to decide whether it's a big enough flaw to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think in some of his books, it almost is. Like Little Dorrit's pretty sentimental. But jury's out on Tale of Two Cities. That's what we have to talk about.
Actually, my friend, the jury's in session.
Uh-oh.
Well, that was most of what we talked about on the Bleak House episode, was trying to litigate Esther and whether she was a caricature or an appropriate.
I would argue that Dickens, like Hemingway, really didn't know how to write women.
Yes. I mean,
I agree.
He didn't know how to write a romantic lead. He could write, like Madame Defarge is a pretty great woman.
Yeah, that's true. And also that
he could write character roles for women.
That woman who ends up shooting her.
Yeah, the servant lady's pretty awesome. I mean, those are two of the best characters.
Miss
Pross. But yeah, just writing the romantic lead, one of the harder things to do, actually. But he does it particularly egregiously poorly. Wow, speaking of poorly, The baggage plane is pouring baggage on us as it flies over right now. What's that sound? Well, it's the sound of the baggage plane, indicating it's time for Baggage Check, the part of the show where we talk about what baggage we bring to this particular work of art. Jake, what is your baggage? We've already alluded to it, of course.
Yeah, I just don't like Dickens. Just don't like him. Never have. I was made to read Dickens in my freshman year of high school. I had to read Great Expectations. This is a story that longtime listeners know, but it's a story that...
It's a formative text for young Jake.
Well, look, I had to read in that class the Odyssey and Shakespeare and any number of things, and it's because you had these ridiculous daily quizzes on your daily reading that, it was like what color... One of the questions is what color was the bag that Pip was holding when the two guys assaulted him or whatever.
That's a way to make you hate Dickens.
Yeah. Well, it didn't work for any of the other books. I had to read them all. So I read the Odyssey, I read Shakespeare, I read all the things. And I loved the Odyssey and I loved Shakespeare. And it was like an awakening time to me to just a whole world of literature that I would never have maybe found on my own.
Well, I dare say if any one of those writers made a handbag red, there would be a purpose and meaning and moral to it, and it would be connected enough that you could probably remember it and do well on a test. If Dickens made a handbag red, yeah, there's a good chance there might be some moral or meaning to it, but there's also a good chance that he's just an overwriter who was giving
includes useless details,
15 details where one or two would have done.
Yeah, and so that was a contributing factor, and I hated Great Expectations. I didn't like the world. I didn't like the experience. I didn't like the experience of reading it. I just didn't enjoy. I just found it incredibly tedious. I've felt that way more or less about Dickens ever since. And I've tried to give him a chance. I tried to give Bleak House a chance.
We bungled it by choosing Bleak House. That was just that was our fault. By our, I mean Brandon's fault.
I psyched myself into, after the fact, going back and being like, man, I must not have really given Bleak House a chance. I'm going to go back and reread it. And so I had this impression in my mind that I had not made it very far in. And I went back and I started reading it and I was like, yeah, I remember this. So let me skip forward. Yeah, I remember this. Let me skip forward. It took to about page 330 or something like that before I found a place where it was like, this is new. Mm-hmm. It's like I gave over 200 or 300 pages to this book and hated every minute of it. And wasn't engaged. I remember a lot of that stuff because he is evocative. I just didn't enjoy it. And so I just don't like him. I don't like his style. I don't like things that feel and smell Victorian. It's poisoned other good things for me because I just sort of put Dickens onto that stuff. So if it looks, smells, feels Victorian, has an air of Victorianism around it, and it has an air of Dickens about it, and I don't want it. And so it just doesn't matter what it's been. There have been a lot of things that I think I have not wanted to read because I just have such an aversion to Dickens. So that's the baggage I brought to Tale of Two Cities.
There you go. My baggage is that I can give 3 items of baggage. Number one, I had a fantastic middle school teacher who was only around for 2 semesters, I think, but he did a really good job of bringing Dickens to life. We read this novel with him. I think it was the first Dickens I'd read, Tale of Two Cities, which is a good place to start as opposed to Bleak House. And he was really excited about it. And you know how it is when you have a good teacher who you like and he is excited about something. It's just infectious. And so he was bounding all over the classroom, drawing guillotines on the whiteboard and just having a lot of fun with it, showing us that great literature can be funny, politically incorrect. He thought he got a big kick out of Jerry Cruncher beating his wife, which I think Dickens means for us to get a big kick out of Jerry Cruncher beating his wife. So that's always stuck in my head. So this book kind of felt fun and a little naughty and a little melodramatic in a way that I, as a middle schooler, appreciated and could understand. Big, broad, splashy themes. Some violence, a nice final showdown for the villainous. It just felt like a what you'd want Dickens to do, which is, and what Dickens has historically done for most people, which is he's actually just a crowd pleaser. And our teacher was keyed into that, and he allowed us to be keyed into that. So that's Dickens baggage number 1. Dickens baggage number 2. Oh, in the class, I should say, happened in the afternoon, right after recess.
Research.
Right after research, because during lunch, we would all go and research things. And so that was always for me the most magical, either the worst or the best part of time of school, depending on what class. If you had a bad class, no class was worse. If you had a good class with an absorbing teacher, then you could really get absorbed as they talked and spun a web of ideas, and the air conditioner or the heater would be kind of humming in the background, and everything would feel kind of still, and you'd be kind of sweaty, and the sweat would be kind of drying, and you'd feel kind of sleepy, and it would almost be this dreamlike or trance-like entry into the world of ideas, which is a fun high that education can give you, despite our sometimes cynicism about certain forms of education on the Bookening. Education can be fun. And even kind of a drug. And
it should be.
And with this particular teacher, I dare say this is how some of the students that have sat under one Brandon Chastain have felt. With this particular teacher, it did have a really magical feeling. So there's any number of things that he did that have become touchstones for me.
That's because I give all my students LSD before I begin.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. And this teacher did give us LSD. He injected straight into the heart.
Meaning learning.
He crushed up the mushrooms. I know you're supposed to smoke them or eat them. I think LSD,
yeah.
But he injected them straight into our heart.
That's amazing. And you survived.
I survived. I was one of the only ones.
The others had long dead.
It was a little bit of a battle royale situation. It was like, if you could survive the LSD, then Angels and Demons would tell you how great these books were. And that's what happened. And it was great. And the air conditioning hummed in the background. And I saw colors. I saw colors that you've never seen. So that was experience number 1.
That was a nice detail, the air conditioning humming in the background. I like that, Nathan.
I was trying to paint a picture, Brandon, with lots of words.
You did a good job.
I mean, I think we've probably all had these classes, whether in college or high school or whatever, if we have any love for school at all.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I can't speak for everyone.
Yeah. So I loved this. I loved Dickens for that reason, kind of rubbed off on me. And then I also associate Dickens with my parents, who tended to watch every BBC Dickens thing that came out. Anytime PBS was showing another Dickens movie, we'd watch it. And his movies are always full of darkness and bad guys and dark themes and violence and sometimes sexual situations. But they get grandfathered in just like Shakespeare, so that you can just kind of watch them even if you're a kid. And so some of my early really frightening memories are from a version of Oliver Twist where Bill Sikes murders poor Nancy, the prostitute, and goes on the run. And he keeps seeing her ghostly vision appear to him. It's his guilt, and they're dramatizing it. And that was terrifying. That was like one of my earliest memories of just watching something that I had nightmares about. Like, what if a ghostly girl just appeared to me and was covered in blood and said, like, it's you got, whispered things to me. And I grew up with the George C. Scott version of Christmas Carol, which is very visceral and scary in the lead up to Marley showing up and the Angel of Death dude at the end and all that, the third ghost of Christmas, whatever his name is, the ghost of Christmas future. So Christmas yet to come, I should say. So I have both, but I have enjoyably terrifying memories of early Dickens. I know all those stories pretty well from the movies and just watching them with my parents, who always got a kick out of the humor. I can remember my dad laughing at all the funny characters and caricatures and any given Dickens thing. Like our household was just a Dickens house in a lot of ways. Although my mom was the only one that ever actually read the novels, and I don't remember her reading them with me. I think she did give me a couple of them. But that's the third thing I wanted to say about Dickens is I have these happy associations with him, but then when I've tried to read him, I do get bogged down in his style a lot of the times, as Jake was talking about. I've enjoyed and read any number of Dickens stories. I've also been defeated by any number of Dickens stories. I would say David Copperfield is one of my favorites. This is one of my favorites. Other things, but there are two that everybody loves that I just don't find captivating at all. And one of them is Great Expectations. I have read that book, but it just does not do it for me. I do not like the character of Pip. I do not like the story. It's just everything Jake says really resonates about Like if that had been my first Dickens, it just would have been like, oh, this guy sucks. Really don't like that book. I don't know why. I mean, it's evocative. Miss Havisham, a lot of that stuff, a lot of those things are really cool and interesting. Like you'd think that'd be a great novel. I would enjoy a movie version.
She sets herself on fire.
Yeah, and she lives in the room with the cake and what she's in her wedding dress. Like, it's the kind of melodrama that I go for because I do like melodrama, but especially dark melodrama, which Dickens does a lot of and does very well. And Great Expectations has good things like that. But the character, Pip is such an unlikable character and his choices are so unlikable. I just cannot follow him. And similarly, for whatever reason, Oliver Twist was always just too treacly for me as a novel. I just don't like the boy. And I don't care much about the gangs and Fagin and Sykes and The Artful Dodger. The movie versions always soften it just a little bit and make those characters just a little bit more engaging. But Dickens is like...
Cats and dogs. They make them cats and dogs.
They make them cats and dogs. They get Billy Joel to do a voice, obviously the greatest musical artist of the 20th century. I tend to like those. But you go back to the original novel and it's just like, I don't know. I think Fagin's just a jerk and a Jew. And I don't think Dickens likes him that much for that reason. Just things like that. So my experience, of all my different fond associations with Dickens, the actual reading of Dickens is perhaps the least fond of them. But I have read, most of his classics and enjoyed them one way or another, minus the two that I mentioned. David Copperfield and Tale of Two Cities, I would say, are two of his masterpieces for sure. And I love Nicholas Nickleby of the early stuff, of the early funnier Dickens. But yeah, I think that's my baggage.
Wow, that's our podcast.
Yeah, sorry. What's your baggage, Brandon?
I don't have any baggage with Dickens, so
that's good.
Fresh slate here.
So, yep, just a
first-time reader of Dickens.
Yep. Field of snow with no footprints.
That's right. No, I think famously for Bookening listeners, got into loving literature because of David Copperfield. Mom gave me a copy of that book when I was young, and I read it, and I still have the copy at home with the words that I underlined that I didn't know. I just loved these characters and loved his writing style and just really fell in love with Dickens. It's interesting because thinking through so I read a lot of him. I really loved Bleak House, but I never cared much for Oliver Twist. Great Expectations was okay. I loved Nicholas Nickleby. I could read parts of Pickwick Papers. I don't think I ever finished that one though. It's not really, it's more episodic. It's not really one that has a trajectory to it. So I read The Old Curiosity Shop, Little Dorrit, those, Martin Chuzzlewit. And those were all fine, but the ones that really stuck out to me would have been The Mystery of Edwin Drood, which I love, Bleak House, and David Copperfield. Those are kind of the height of Dickens for me. Never really cared for hard times, and Tale of Two Cities when I was young, it was never one of my favorites.
Interesting.
And so it's been more recent that when I taught Tale of Two Cities to some AP students not too long ago, and I was like, oh, yeah, I like this one. This is good. This is a Dickens that I enjoy going back to. Like when we tried to read Bleak House a couple years ago, it was fine, but it didn't do it for me in the same way that it used to. I still like it. It's still one of my favorites, but it's been a long time since I've read David Copperfield. I used to read that book a lot.
We have to do that for the show, probably sooner rather than later.
It was one of those that I would read once a year, and then it kind of got supplanted by Finding Tolstoy.
Right.
So, and then War and Peace became that book. So I tend to, even like with music, I'll go back to the same thing over and over again. It's not like I'm looking for something that's too new. I like to
luxuriate.
I like to wallow in the pleasures that I've already had rather than go out and try to find new ones. So.
At any point in time, I would have been happy with turning this show into just the Tolstoy Austen show and reread those. But then we wouldn't have read Moby Dick.
We wouldn't have. So you find those little kernels of pleasure.
I guess this episode is actually coming out after Moby Dick, maybe, which we have not recorded yet. But it's going to be interesting when we talk about Melville.
Because they both have a fairly ornate style.
Yeah, they're both using two words where one
of them has a point.
Yep. Yeah.
And I actually just really like Ishmael as a narrator.
Yeah, Ishmael's he's a fun.
There's something to the way he tells. There's like a sea shanty intelligent quality to it that I really. Oh, we're not doing Melville right now.
Yeah. So. We've done 2 podcasts now where we drift, no pun intended, into Melville. Yep. Your baggage, Brandon. Was there anything else?
No, that's it for my baggage.
So you love Dickens. So Brandon's our resident Dickens defender.
Yeah. I think so, but I think as years have gone by, I've mellowed on. I think that Dickens is great. I still love Dickens. I think that there are some Dickens stories that work better and some that I could go without. So it's not like I think I have a more mature take on Dickens than I would have years ago, which is just something that happens, you know.
Well, some of his pleasures are things like plot twists. There are pleasures that don't always work as well on a second or third or fourth reading, in my humble opinion, anyway.
I imagine that David Copperfield's still going to have the same charm that it used to.
I think you're right about that.
I like magicians, so
yeah. When we all go see David Copperfield and do a podcast,
yeah.
What's that sound? It's the horns ushering us into the. No! I'm sorry. It's the click of the camera bringing us into the big picture, the part of the show where we give our general thoughts on the novel Tale of Two Cities. And I thought to start us off, I would actually read from a critic named Fitzjames Stephen, or maybe Stephen Fitzjames, of Dickens' time. I found a little quote here that I thought would be fun to just throw into the mix. So this is a critic writing upon Tale of Two Cities publication. Quote, "If it had not borne Mr. Dickens' name, it would in all probability have hardly met with a single reader. And if it has any popularity at all, it must derive it from the circumstance that it stands in the same relation to his other books as salad dressing stands in towards a complete salad." Okay. This book is to Dickens' other books what salad dressing is to a complete salad. "It is a bottle of the sauce in which Pickwick and Nicholas Nickleby were dressed, and to which they owed much of their popularity, and though it has stood open on the sideboard for a very long time and has lost a good deal of its original flavor, the philosophic inquirer who is willing to go through the penance of tasting it will be, to a certain extent, repaid. He will have an opportunity of studying in its element a system of cookery which procured for its ingenious inventor unparalleled popularity and enabled him to infect the literature of his country with a disease which manifests itself in such repulsive symptoms that it has gone far to invert the familiar doctrines of the Latin grammar about ingenious arts, and to substitute for them the conviction that the principal results of a persistent devotion to literature are an incurable vulgarity of mind and of taste, and intolerable arrogance of temper."
Wow, that's amazing.
That's paragraph 1. Paragraph 2.
He got a lot out of that metaphor. Is it because it stood out? The dressing was left out too long that it infected with the disease?
Here's what I have to say so far.
Yeah.
You can keep your salad and I'll take the salad dressing. And I don't disagree with the disease.
Yeah.
How about that?
Bunch of gross leaves, but I'll drink
What was the disease again?
Well, Brandon.
The way that Dickens' influence on
I don't know what the disease was, but it manifests itself in such repulsive symptoms that it has gone far to invert the familiar doctrines of the Latin grammar about ingenious arts.
What?
And to substitute for them the conviction that the principal results of a persistent devotion to literature are an incurable vulgarity of mind and of taste, and intolerable arrogance of temper. You know how salad dressing does that sometimes. We've all had
So it makes you have vulgar taste and an intolerable temper.
We've all had a buttermilk ranch that has done that to us.
Dickens has lowered the conversation.
I guess. Yeah. Okay.
For everyone. He is disgusting and he writes a bunch of pulpy trash.
And because this book is so reduced from what his other books are, it's a good case study.
Is the pulpy trash, and it's a case study of the bare elements of.
Oh, I see.
That have lowered the bar, lowered the level.
Well, can I say that I don't think this guy would have ever been able to write a metaphor like that without Dickens?
Paragraph 2.
Yeah.
All right, paragraph 2. Such is the story, and it would. I think this is after he's described the plot. Such is the story, and it would perhaps be hard to imagine a clumsier or more disjointed framework for the display of the tawdry wares which form Mr. Dickens' stock in trade. The broken back.
Is this a contemporary?
Yes, this is a contemporary.
Okay.
Yeah, this guy.
Why does this guy sound like Dickens?
The broken-backed way in which the story meanders along from 1775 to 1792 and back again to 1760 or thereabouts is an excellent instance of the complete disregard of the rules of literary composition which have marked the whole of Mr. Dickens' career as an author. No portion of his popularity is due to intellectual excellence. The higher pleasures
That's probably true.
the higher pleasures which novels are capable of giving are those which are derived from the development of a skillfully constructed plot or the careful and moderate delineation of character, and neither of these are to be found in Mr. Dickens' works. Nor has his influence upon his contemporaries had the slightest tendencies to promote the cultivation by others of the qualities which produced them. The two main sources of his popularity are the power of working upon the feelings by the coarsest stimulants, and the power of setting common occurrences in a grotesque and unexpected light. In his earlier works, the skill and vigor with which these operations were performed were so remarkable as to make it difficult to analyze the precise means by which the effect was produced on the mind of the reader. Now that familiarity has deprived his books of the gloss and freshness which they formerly possessed, the mechanism is laid bare, and the fact that the means by which the effect is produced are really mechanical has become painfully apparent. It would not, indeed, be a matter of much difficulty to frame from such a book as The Tale of Two Cities regular recipes for grotesque and pathetic writing by which any required quantity of the article might be produced with infallible certainty. Got him.
Whoa.
That's why nobody remembers Dickens and everybody remembers
James.
James Fitzjames.
Oh, good for you, James Fitzjames. So like sort of grumpy guy who would write against Marvel movies nowadays.
Oh, man.
Wow.
He's like the intelligence that I expect from literature, which is why I only read Thomas Hardy.
I wasn't going to read this, but he even goes after the illustrations. We must say one word in conclusion as to the illustrations. They are thoroughly worthy of the text. It is impossible to imagine faces and figures more utterly unreal or more wretchedly conventional than those by which Mr. Brown represents Mr. Dickens' characters. The handsome faces are caricatures, and the ugly ones are like nothing human.
Whoa. It's almost as though they were drawn with a pencil.
This
guy's great.
I just like that he
This
thinks
be the James Fitzjames podcast.
We should like find him. I'm sure he has many other things that he's commented on.
Yeah, I will start if we're reading anything in the area.
Like Melville.
Yeah, Melville we might have a James Fitzjames. Dracula might have had a James. He would have had fun with that one. James Fitzjames. I just like his blithe assertion that seeing the mechanics of how Dickens does it laid bare, anyone could do it just as well. It's like, wow, James Fitzjames, you could have made a lot of money. You could have been really famous. You knew the entire formula of exactly how Dickens does everything. Arguably the most successful writer of not just his time, but almost any time. You should just do it.
Yeah, in terms of pure success, who's been more successful?
Right. I mean, if he's not the top author, he's at least in the top 10, maybe top 5. And
I mean, honestly, Agatha Christie, like who?
In terms of just how many copies sold, I'm going to say Agatha Christie, Shakespeare, the Bible, a handful of things like that. Maybe Pilgrim's Progress off the top of my head. But just in terms of pure numbers of cumulative copies sold.
Yeah, he's up there for sure.
And then throw in the influence too, where you have things like Don't Be a Scrooge.
Right. Well, anyone can do it. Just like anyone can write Harry Potter. All you need is a perfect idea.
At the perfect time.
A perfect
and the
plot.
ability to execute it.
Perfectly.
Rather perfectly.
Characters that people will respond to that are perfectly relatable and yet perfectly complicated. You just have to do everything perfectly. It's really pretty easy. That is what James Fitzjames thinks about this novel. And here we are in the big picture. What do you guys think about this novel? Do you like it better than James Fitzjames?
This guy really has a bone to pick, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Huh.
He sent this novel to the guillotine.
I have to admit, I do like this novel better than James Fitzjames.
Well, I mean, you could hate this novel and like it better than James Fitzjames.
That's true.
Apparently this guy worked in the legal world, and so...
Oh, no wonder.
He was also a literary reviewer, so here's a quote. "Who is this man who is so much wiser than the rest of the world that he can pour contempt on all the institutions of his country?" So he's just kind of bitter at the guy for being so angry about...
That's James Fitzjames talking, or...
He's just angry about
I thought it was somebody talking about James. James.
Yeah, it's
No,
pretty
no.
perfect description of
No,
James.
It's called projection, James.
He's getting angry at Dickens for attacking Parliament and attacking.
So he has a perfect personal beef with Dickens.
He's got a personal beef, yeah.
Yeah.
He's just mad that he's drawing attention to how horrible the Chancery courts were.
So this guy's like the Salieri to Dickens Mozart or something.
Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah, let's read. We'll have to do like a whole month of just James Fitzjames essays.
Find it behind Patreon. We read James Fitzjames essays behind Patreon.
That sounds like fun, actually.
I think people should leave reviews of us on. Yeah, that would be fun.
If you can compare our show to a salad in one of your reviews. In fact, I'm asking a patron, if you haven't reviewed us yet, give us 5 stars or whatever star rating you think we deserve, which is 5. And
some people lately have thought us 1.
Yeah, but
really?
Did they compare us to salads?
No, they should have. Have we gotten any new ones since the last ones we read? We had some fun ones. People just don't like us lately.
Well, what's people's problem? Most recent one is somebody saying, "You guys are so funny. I love the books you guys read have increased my to be read list." Thank you.
And they just keep trying to like it.
Yeah, we read that one before.
Yeah, so never mind. We're fine, guys.
But if we could get some new reviews comparing the show to salad, preferably in a complimentary light, we'd love it. But we're just getting to the big thing that everybody's been waiting for. Jake was saying what he thought about this novel.
Okay. All right. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I had fun with it.
You ate that salad.
I ate the salad. I like the salad.
Even though it's a Victorian salad and kind of probably warm and soggy.
So here's the trick. I did have to have a trick, and the trick is I listened to it. And I listened to it at a pretty fast clip.
Well, the joke's on you because that's probably how Dickens intended you.
Right.
Well, I know that, and that's why I didn't feel bad about it.
Because one thing I didn't mention in context is most people would read these around the evening fire. And people got excited when the next Dickens volume would come in on a steamer.
And that makes so much sense. And it makes sense of the broad characterizations and stuff. You can just imagine a good dad or a good mom just doing voices for all the characters.
And I got a good reader, Shakespearean style actor, just really giving himself to it and enjoying himself.
Came into your house every night and read
every night, yeah.
While you would go to bed.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
around
awesome.
The fire.
I think it can even actually help with somebody like Lucy because you can give her just a little bit of a simpering, like you can actually just play her up as a caricature
right,
too.
and that's exactly the kind of thing that this reader did, so that he leaned hard into the grotesque of it all in such a way that you got to laugh at sort of the irony, sort of ironically at certain aspects of the book. And so that made it enjoyable as an enjoyable experience goes. And listening to it on 2x speed meant that you're just flying through stuff that you don't care about and you don't get bogged down because it's over before you know it. And
that's the way to do it.
Also, there's a lot of fun. I mean, there were great little images and hooks at the beginning that were just cool. You get that the wine cask, yeah, the wine cask in the streets, and
everybody going and getting dirt in with the wine, just digging it out.
The mud and the wine and the blood of it all.
Yeah, that's like that sustained metaphor. We got a lot out of that within my AP class.
I bet you did. That was made for an AP lit class.
So I just enjoyed it. It fueled my evening walks for a while, so I was motivated to go on my walks so I could listen to more Dickens. And
nice. He should just be what you listen to on your walks in the evenings. Dickens, his whole oeuvre.
Yeah, or not.
You tried.
But Tale of Two Cities did it for me, and I had a lot of fun with it all the way through, and may have even, like, as much as I hated Sidney, what's his face?
Carton.
Sidney Carton, I still managed to get a tear or two out of me at the end.
Tis a far, far better thing I do.
Which, you see it all coming. But the beautiful little slip that sort of happened, you do get this. It's like you were saying in listening to Farewell to Arms, you're not tracking quite the end of things.
Yeah.
Because you're just on a train,
mm-hmm.
and whereas if you hold a book, you're always tracking your approach, and you're able to follow things much more closely. And so I knew long before it happened what was going to happen. But what did slip out of my head was that I knew the lines the book ended on.
Right.
And I just never had the time to put together.
Oh, that speech. That
speech belongs to Sidney Carton at the end of this book. And so it snuck up on me
mm-hmm.
and drug a tear out of me. which I didn't expect. So that was a cool way to experience. I think probably the best way to experience the end of the book.
I've had a similar thing happen. I can't name the book, but where I'm reading a novel and I don't realize there's a bunch of back material. Like there's an excerpt from the author's next book or something that takes up 100 pages or something that. So you don't know the end is anywhere close and your brain hasn't calibrated, and then suddenly it happens. It can be either really disruptive, which I've had that where it's like, oh no, you ended here, or really cool. Like, really wow, I wasn't able to actually calibrate in my usual cynical, I've read a million stories way, and that was fun.
Yeah.
So
that was kind of how I experienced the end of this, and putting that speech into that loser's mouth was
that great hero
loser.
We'll talk about it in Hall of Heroes. Brandon, your general thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I think that.
Where would you place it in the oeuvre these days? Because it was pretty low, you said, as a young man.
Yeah, no, it didn't do it for me as a kid, but I would put it in probably top 5 for sure.
Cool.
It's one that I would go back to. I think that the pieces work well together. The time hopping from the past to the present, like he does, works well. Cast of characters is fun. Overall, I think that I disagree with Mr. James Fitzjames. I think this actually encapsulates what a good Dickens story does well.
Yes.
About the only one that I would say rises to the level of being a perfect little Dickens story would be Christmas Carol. Mm-hmm. They seem to just be a Dickens story, and really, he has no other agenda.
I prefer to think that this is not a Dickens story, and that's why I like it.
Oh, well.
I think it kind of splits the difference. I mean, it is.
Prefer to think you're living in denial.
It is restrained in
I'm okay with that.
It is restrained in its comedy, which I have to imagine. Some of the reason Jake doesn't like Dickens, I just have to imagine, is that's true. The slapstick doesn't do it for him. And
Christmas Carol's a little restrained in his comedy too, though. So
yeah, well, Christmas Carol's much more exaggerated. Everything that Dickens does is always grotesque and Dickensian, but in both cases, I think we're a little bit more somber and restrained than some of the early Dickens.
Bleak House is pretty somber and restrained.
But it's also like the guy's going to die of spontaneous combustion. It's so big.
That's a pretty un-Dickensian story, but it's just so weird. That story is weird.
This book has exactly one crazy conceit you have to accept, which is that these two guys look alike for a number of plot things, including the big thing at the end, to work, and that's fine.
Yeah, so maybe it's I think I'm wrong. I think that this is where plot just comes through for Dickens, and he just tells a story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
where the Dickensian elements are not as prominent here. Yeah, I think that's right.
It is in that sense like
the most Dickensian is David Copperfield.
I didn't mind how obvious the plot setups and things were in the same way that I don't mind that sort of thing in Rolling.
Yeah. I'm going to back it up. I'm wrong. This is not as Dickensian.
But it is Dickensian in that he does love, maybe we should talk about this in twists and turns, but he loves twists and turns, and he's very satisfying. Like,
can we just hop over to twists and turns?
Yeah, why not? Hey, the Roadster's coming through. It's the Roadster indicating we're going in twists and turns. So you know that the villain has to have a final confrontation. But then the fact that he has basically a fist fight between Miss Pross, representing all of England, and Madame Defarge.
Talk about a callback. That's the battle in the Harry Potter between.
Yeah, well,
Bellatrix Lestrange.
You got to imagine.
She was loves these books.
Yeah, no, there's no question. Reading this,
it's not like a ripoff, but it's a nice little nod.
Yeah, Rowling's definitely a Dickens fan.
Yeah,
right.
You see that
where I think you're about to go, and I'm just going to jump on it.
Yeah,
is there are always going to be twists and turns that make any plot-driven novel work. The question is how, and you can see them coming, but the question is how satisfying can you make them?
Right.
They can be obvious so long as they really, if they have good enough setups and good enough payoffs, as long as they work. What matters is the takeaway. And that's what I actually resented a little bit about Sidney Carton's payoff, is because I just resented working through the setup all the way. And I could not believe that he was going to make the payoff work because I just didn't like him.
Right.
And I didn't like that he got to be the one to fall on his sword, and that's the way that it was all going to work in his self-pitying, stupid way. Mm-hmm. And then the speech happened, and I was just like, man, you jerk.
Also, as lame and utterly over-the-top sentimental as it is, the girl that's in line in front of him.
Oh, right, yeah. That totally works,
too. That's pretty tear-jerking.
Yeah.
Like,
is it going to hurt?
Must I die? You know?
Yeah.
Having her, it allows you to see that Sidney can get out of himself. And
right. It's nice
that's another. It was a little genius little touch that helped in terms of Sidney's character.
Yeah.
He's not just being like all prophetic and amazing by himself in line.
Yeah. I mean, and you do get elements of that with him and the friend who takes advantage of him and who he allows to take advantage of him, that lawyer colleague.
The guy that proposes.
So you get a sense that there's a backstory that we don't get from Sidney or do we get it?
I don't think we quite get it.
But you get a sense that there's more to this.
Well, there's that whole sob love story.
Yeah.
Thing.
That's right.
He had a lover before Lucy. I actually don't remember that.
Yeah.
I like to forget it because I like to imagine that it's something even sadder and darker than that.
Yeah, and so like she reminded, and so he just wants to.
Okay, yeah, I guess you're right about that.
You want to get the sense that he was like, there's something seriously dark from his past.
Right.
It's keeping an otherwise good person because he works hard. He is intelligent. He just won't allow himself to be seen that way by others. A character that a lot of other stories have now picked up on.
Right.
And the James Fitzjames poison idea. Yeah, the twists and turns work here. It also helps that it's historical, so you know that things are going to be bad.
Right.
And so you're just expecting it.
Yeah. I mean, somebody has to go under the blade. I mean, if you're doing a novel about this.
So you're entering into it knowing that things are going to get nasty because they're going to somehow get involved with one of the nastiest parts of history.
Right.
And
the novel might as well be called During the Time When People's Heads Were Cut Off.
Yeah, it's like having a World War II series.
Right.
You know that bad things are going to happen.
But one of the things that made me fall in love with this novel as a kid is just realizing, Hollywood didn't come out of nowhere. The idea that we can actually do really satisfying, obvious, like the bad guy and good guy have a fist fight and then somebody pulls a gun and the bad guy goes down. It's really fun to see some boring old literary guy doing that. And that is the fun of Dickens, is realizing what a ham he is and what a crowd pleaser he is. And the bad guy is always going to meet some grisly fate.
Or the awesome storming of the Bastille scene where it comes back to the cell that he was in. Yeah. That's the downfall, what they find there.
And that just feels like a cliffhanger at the end of a TV show, dun, dun, dun.
Well, yeah, it's like it's storming and and they're all going to the Bastille and then you go to his cell and it's like, we've got it.
Yeah.
It's like what you would expect to be, it's like the Infinity Stone or something.
Right, exactly. That's the thing before we go to credits.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything else to say about twists and turns. We have the classic, I guess the other big twists and turns are the Marquis de Evamond or whatever his name is.
Oh, yeah.
He's Charles Darnay's father, and also he's a horrible rapist.
What an awful scene.
Jerk.
When you find out what he had done. Yeah, Madame Defarge is awful, but you find out that she has a pretty good reason to be awful.
Yeah. Well, we're working our way around the format weirdly, but what's that sound? It's the sound of a creepy organ ushering us into the villain's lair. So we got Madame Defarge, who I would argue is one of the great villains of literature.
Villainesses.
Well, and I remember...
Just keep knitting.
Yeah, I learned such an important lesson about how villains should be portrayed when I watched a TV adaptation of this, where she's laughing and she's like, we got to get those. Like, they give her dialogue. And it's like, no. The entire thing that's scary about her is the understatement. The fact that she's not doing anything overtly villainous. The fact that she's doing something that should be very warm and maternal, but somehow it's displaced and put in a context, recontextualized into something villainous.
Sinister.
She's
suddenly knitting is sinister.
Yeah, and that's all she does. And
it's talk about the ability to build metaphors with this story. Like every time I see a woman knitting now,
it
does.
Oh, no. I've had that thought.
Successfully made me think, well, there's a Madame Defarge.
Right. And yeah, just the understatement. And then when she does go big, when she has the big basic fist fight at the end, and when she testifies against our hero, I can never remember the name, Charles Darnay.
Yeah.
when she actually has to say something, you want to listen, you want to lean in instead of her assaulting us with her villainy all the time.
Well, shout out to my AP students again. Another great discussion we had about this in particular was that part of her monstrous quality is the fact that you think the husband's going to be the monster, but then it's actually her manipulating things. She's like a spider.
Yep.
She's behind the scenes. She's actually, so it's authority.
And that's why knitting is such a wonderfully chosen little metaphor, because it does carry the connotation of a spider.
Right.
Yeah.
Weaving a web while still having that sort of prosaic and maternal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like what child is she knitting for that she's about to give birth to?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Whose socks are she making?
She's just knitting the names of the people they're going to kill.
Well, you watch this TV version and they get, I don't think it's her, but they get like a Helena Bonham Carter type to just play. Like, can you just do evil for us? And she's like, I'm going to knit his name or whatever, you know, and it's just like, that's such a
that ain't it.
Lame way. You have not captured what's scary about this character at all.
But then there is just the monstrousness of natural order of things being flipped on its head.
Right.
Because women, and when the jealousy and anger of a woman is in charge, things go very poorly.
Yep. And when the poor rise up, things go poorly. Yeah. We do need to talk about the Marquis de Evermond. Is that his name? A little bit in the villain's lair.
I mean, he's more
of just a villain. He hits the child in his carriage and is like, here's a few coins. Don't you feel better now?
Yeah, it's awful.
It is awful. I wondered whether
sipping on his chocolate.
Yeah, a little non-Dickensian restraint might have been in order there. He's so over the top. I mean, yes. I guess Dickens wants to say, well, this is why Madame de Varge is sympathetic and has a point. And
I think in the end, Dickens' background with having seen the blacking warehouses and having seen the condition of the poor and having written a book like Christmas Carol where he did that to raise money for the poor, he has a natural sympathy for the state of the French peasant.
Yeah.
And there's the whole scene where he talks about the fact that this is just a part of the natural, that basically France had sewed this for themselves. Like he has this one, the closest he does to like a Tolstoy.
Of course, the British would say that.
Yeah.
Right.
But also,
true.
I think it's true.
But
yeah, and of course, part of the point with him also is that the British are lucky that this didn't happen for them.
Right.
Because they've done just as many horrible things. So the bank is supposed to be the same as Evermond.
Right.
Right.
But there is something about Miss Pross. I mean, I think it's very telling that Miss Pross is the one who finishes off Madame Defarge, because there is something about British pluck and British maternal instincts, and there's something better about England, I think, that Dickens would cop to if you pressed him. Like there's a reason.
I don't think it would have taken much pressing, because I don't think anybody was ashamed to wear their colors like that.
Oh, yeah, it definitely was. All the British people were shouting, "Yeah,
get that." Well, he even says like. He has one of his hammy Dickens moments where I don't think he says England versus France. He does say eternal good locked with eternal evil or something like that. It's pretty over the top, but I love that scene. I wondered if maybe we didn't need the Marquis to strike down a child in his carriage. I thought he weighted the deck. He wants you to question the French Revolution, as well you should. But then he's like, his one portrait of an aristocrat is an evil, cackling, rapist, gay.
But he still gives you Darnay.
He does give you Darnay. That's
he gives you Darnay. He also does give you the other one who's drinking chocolate. That's not the same aristocrat, right?
No, that's the Marquis, I think, isn't it? He's the guy that stabbed Darnay's father.
Yeah, I felt like there were two different guys we got. One was just kind of the silly, careless, but not evil aristocrat. So he gives us a couple types, and then you get the evil, wicked, cackling one.
Yeah,
and you get the sense that he deserved what he got.
Right.
Yeah, and a whole bunch of other people who didn't deserve what they got swept up in the mix.
We get both of those. I'm not sure that Dickens ever quite ties them together. We have the evil aristocrat over here, and then in this scene, we're supposed to say, well, maybe they're going too far. I guess they're going too far.
Well, we got the lady at the end with Sydney.
Right, exactly. I guess Dickens is a good storyteller. It's as much what makes him great as what makes him bad there. He's just not too worried about continuity. He's going to grab whatever elements off the shelf he needs to make the salad taste good in this particular instance.
And for this one, you want to not... It's like Tulkinghorn from Bleak House. You don't want to feel bad when the guy gets murdered.
Yeah.
he's got to deserve it.
Yeah.
And he deserves it.
Yeah.
He's pretty awful.
Yeah. Knocks the child down, and then I don't even remember exactly what the backstory is.
So I kind of agree. I think that he could have had
Madame Defarge.
Her sister.
Her sister. He drives her sister mad.
And killed him.
Yeah.
And then you get the sense that, it would have been nice had he had a little bit more nuance with the aristocrats.
They should be evil. I mean,
because he gave us some nuance with the poor, right? He made them out like animals, but they were made that way.
Right.
But in the end, I think you're right too. For Dickens, it's always going to be about character and plot.
And he is just a proto-socialist. He does have a chip on his shoulder against the rich and the aristocrats, and he's not going to give them the same sympathy. I think it's just as simple as that. Yeah. But I think it's too bad. I think we could have a richer, fuller picture of the period if one of the things that is missing from this portrait of the period is a little bit more nuance when it comes to the aristocracy, in my humble opinion. We should say he's also drawing on a book. Is it Thomas Carlyle's book on the Revolution, which is a very famous, popular book, which Dickens just read a bunch, took a lot of imagery from. Yep. And apparently it's quite an evocative book. Maybe some of the metaphors, even with the spilled wine and stuff, may come from that book. Anything else you guys want to say before we leave the villain's lair? Mm-mm. What are those horns? What's that sound of horns ushering us into the Hall of Heroes? Now's your chance to talk about some of the best characters in literature. I'm going to just go ahead and say Charles Darnay, Lucy Darnay, as she becomes Sidney Carton,
Mr. Manette. And one of my favorites is the Laurie.
Mr. Laurie the banker.
One of the unexpected heroes.
He's great. Dickens has a line in lovable supporting characters like Mr. Laurie, and they're almost always great.
And so I think that the line that he does draw between London and Paris is that it's much more institutional with the leaders that makes France bad. And so there's some sense that they had to die in order for France to ever have the revolution that it had. Right. And with England, it's more institutional, like who's the bad guy in the banks? Nobody. They're it's
banking itself.
It's Kafkaesque. Like there is no bad guy. It's just the thing. The bank's bad. And you get guys like Mr. Laurie who are part of this bad system, but are decent guys at heart. And I do think that's one of the big distinctions he draws between London and Paris. And you see that with the different characters. Right. And so, but yeah, I mean, Darnay, he's like a Disney prince, right? Mm-hmm. And so really, I guess, with Dickens' heroes, you usually get pretty one-dimensional figures. The dad's interesting, but largely because he's old and
a little crazy with
his grief, but understandable because he...
There's some good scenes, though. I like when Mr. Laurie and Miss Pross bury the, shoes that he makes to pass the time.
And so there's and we talked a lot about this with the Bleak House, so I don't know if we have to talk too much about it here, but Lucy she's not a very well-drawn character. She's a little bit angelic. Mm-hmm. Like you can't imagine Lucy doing anything bad.
Right, no.
She's perfect in how she waits for her husband outside his cell. She's perfect in the way
a year
something.
Stands on the street corner.
Yeah, she's perfect in the way that which is her downfall, right? Because then doesn't Defarge see her out there or something, or Defarge's vixens or whatever they are. And then you have, by the way, when they have to escape, that's a pretty cool plot thing too. You're actually wondering, are they going to make it out with all the guards and stuff? So nice. He does a good job there. Yeah, she's just a little bit too good. Mm-hmm. And Dickens was not good at making the females in his novel have any sort of depth as far
dimensionality of any kind.
Well, as we talked about before, when I was about 13, I read the novel Dracula. I was pretty impressed with the womanhood depicted by old Mina Harker in that book. But the further along I get into life and the further along I get into the marriage, the less impressed I am by this simpering Victorian notion of womanhood. And the more it just seems to reflect a really broken society, and the fact that people like Bram Stoker or Charles Dickens were really broken and really mistreated their women and really wanted to sentimentalize their fictional portraits in order to atone for their sins or cover it up or whatever. Like it's ridiculous.
Sentimentality is just a cover for guilt.
If you met this woman, you wouldn't want to marry her because she'd barely be able to stand up. She's so airy and there's nothing to her. And who wants to be with someone who's just simpering and good and never pushes back or has any personality. I mean, at least people make fun of Fanny Bryce in Mansfield Park, but at least Jane Austen created a full, complex, interesting version of that type of person who had a reason to be that way and made some mistakes because she was that way. But yeah, Lucy's a pretty pathetic character. What do you guys think? Did you guys have Jake? Jake just thought Sidney Carton was a loser and resented.
I mean, he's the
him
big
being
one.
foisted
He's the
on
big
you.
one to talk about here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I did. I just thought Sidney Carton was a loser. I did not like him, and I did not like him being foisted on me as the hero. And I resented the turn with a smile of sort of...
You got me, Dickens.
Yeah, you got... I can't believe you...
You showed me how you're going to do the trick, and then you did the trick, and I fell for it.
I never believed you the whole way through, and I can't believe that you pulled it off as well as you did, you dog. You didn't deserve it. Sidney Carton didn't deserve it. That's the way I felt.
Well, I'll be interested to hear what Brandon has to say. I might try and make space for that a little bit by saying, or make some space, push back a little bit, by saying, I'm not sure how well Sidney Carton works, because he seems kind of insubstantial in reading this book. He seems almost as wispy in his characterization as Charles Darnay and Lucy in his way, because he just seems like he exists. He's just a setup for the punchline at the end.
Yes.
He's only ever as dissolute and listless and all these things as he needs to be in order to set up exactly his one heroic sacrificial act. So you just see it. It really does feel like a Conjuring trick. You're just seeing smoke and mirrors the whole time. And there's not enough specificity to kind of make him into a real...
And the reality is people like that don't make that kind of play. Unless they do make it because they want that. But then it's just for the wrong reasons. It's not noble.
I think you could write a character. I think you could write a character that had some of these external qualities and made this choice, but the choice would have to be built into who he was from the beginning instead of just another twist. But I do think... The only space I want to make is it might be easier for us to see the Conjuring trick because we're downstream of thousands of these stories and thousands of these characters in a way that people in Dickens' times maybe weren't as much. Sidney Carton is obviously type. He's obviously a type that exists before Sidney Carton, but there's certainly been a lot of Sidney Carton since. And I just wonder if the average person reading this novel at the time wouldn't have just not keyed into the motif that's being played here quite as early or quite as easily. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm being condescending to Victorians. They actually would be just as in touch with what Dickens doing, and it wouldn't have been any less obvious to them. But I'm just wondering.
Well, if you were to ask James Fitzjames.
Right. Well,
What he thought, yeah.
Yeah, he just say, you're doing straight melodrama, and this is obvious. So maybe I'm wrong. That was just my attempt to make a little space. Like maybe because we grew up downstream of Dickens, we see the trick, we see the magic trick, where some people wouldn't have. Maybe I guess I failed to make space. Brandon, what do you think?
I mean, I do think he attempts to give it some depth to Carton, like with that relationship with the friend. So you get a sense of a backstory and history.
I'm surprised by how little there is of that, though.
Yeah,
there's only a few chapters that.
That's what I was going to say, is that I think that there needed to be more.
Carton's kind of set up, and then he shows up at the very end.
You get that one chapter where he is walking around the city, which is a pretty good chapter, where he comes to the realization of what he wants to do. But it all does, and my students picked up on this too. And there's that scene where he goes and talks to Lucy, where he declares his love for her, is a little pathetic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Stalkery.
Yep.
Yeah, it's stalkery.
Manipulative.
Yeah. May I still be invited to your house sometimes to be a houseplant?
I can be good for you.
I can be a houseplant. I don't have to say anything. Just let me gaze upon your children sometimes.
Yeah. So
it's very weird and horrible.
It is. Sometimes Dickens, I think, was tone deaf when it came to stuff like that.
Yes.
So I get what he was trying to do with Carton, and I think in the end, it pays off because the story makes it pay off. But the character it's disappointing because he's trying to do the bad boy countercultural figure who's actually has a heart of gold.
Right.
Which, like a Han Solo.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's trying to do.
Right.
Yep.
But yeah, Sidney Carton ain't no Han Solo.
Nope.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Every kid grew up with Star Wars,
Yeah.
which means they already know this twist. Maybe without Star Wars, Sidney Carton would seem a little less mechanical. I don't know.
Because Han Solo, you could see him making this decision.
Right.
And it would seem perfectly fine and justified. There's just something, I think the whole weird, his inability to write a love scene and understand the mechanics of love, maybe from personal guilt. I don't know what was going on with Dickens, but
he's just got to block. Lucy is...
Yeah, it gets in the way of anything. Like the worst parts of David Copperfield are around the wife and
she's
Agnes.
awful. Yeah, it's awful. It's
like, it's just, and so there's like some sort of subconscious guilt, I think, that prevents Dickens from writing these things very well, and therefore it flaws his books.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Which is probably why, as far as love stories go, Great Expectations is the one that works the best on that end, because it's just weird and twisted from the beginning.
Yeah, Great Expectations is actually Dickens writing with some honesty about the way that he understood and experienced sexual politics and all that sort of thing.
It's just, that's a weird...
It's just a weird power play.
Yeah.
Man.
Never going to get a Stella.
Yep. Hey, it's the drip, drip, drip of the crawlway of secondary characters. Guys, any thoughts on Jerry Cruncher, Miss Laurie, Miss Pross?
Like you said earlier, Dickens does have a line on secondary characters, and it's pretty fun.
I think she has the same line that C.S. Lewis, who probably drew from him, has. The sort of staunch, loyal, Puddleglum, Trumpkin type character. Yep. Dickens, Mr. Laurie's like that. Miss Pross is like that. It makes him really lovable. I
think it's something that's very British, that sort of particular, that kind of character is just lovable.
Yeah.
Like, all creatures great and small. That's what makes all the farmers that he goes and sees lovable.
Samwise Gamgee, obviously, is an archetype of that.
It's just, and I think that the British just have a deep love for that sort of village farmer kind of figure, and it comes through in their works. I think it's just built into their national character. Right. So therefore, things like Laurie, there's a character that's very much like him in Mystery of Edwin Drood called Grewgious. And it's just these guys who you expect them to be stodgy and bad, but they end up being good guys.
Yeah.
And that that their stodginess almost, it's like a butler. Their stodginess almost makes them, and it's what makes them so endearing.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Agreed. And Jerry Cruncher's enduring because he beats his wife, and it's funny. Brandon was just saying that off mic.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think it's
he
hilarious.
always laughs when he beats his wife.
Right. Well, he thinks it's funny.
She thinks it's funny too. That's what's great. And my son Elliot, he loves to go out and dig up bodies with me.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys dug up Jane Austen, beat her over the head with her own shin bone.
We sure did. I dig up Nabokov occasionally. And do something. I forget. Oh, Hemingway. We box. That's what I do.
Yeah. Anything else you guys want to say? I mean, Jerry Cruncher, I keep bringing him up just because he is such a... I don't know what to say about him besides it's interesting that this is the morals and mores of that society allowed for that character to be a funny type, the grave robbing wife beater.
Yeah, it's hilarious stuff.
As a humorous supporting character.
Yep.
And I don't know that I have any real insight about that. Just it's interesting that it occurs.
Yeah.
Does it reflect something deeper about the psyche of Dickens? I don't know.
It's just, maybe not Dickens, but probably that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That they were more fine with joking and laughing about things that would make us uncomfortable today.
That is true.
But then there are things that we laugh and joke about that they wouldn't be, such as female sexuality.
Yep, that is also true. Far be it for anyone to ever do anything but gaze in wonder at the female sexuality of someone like Lucy Darnay or Lucy Monet or whatever her name is.
Men can have desire, but women, no.
It's not that they can't, it's just that they don't, because they're perfect.
Yeah.
Simpering little creatures. Guys, what's that sound? It's the sound of the Salon of Style. Here we are.
Dickens has the best style. What, Jake? Yeah, I think he's better than Hemingway.
So, Jake, you found this. Jake's just staring with disdain at Brandon right now. Deathly stare. So, Jake, you found this style to be actually better, or just you found a way to game it so you didn't have to pay too much attention to the style?
It's hard to tell how much I gamed it and how much it just wasn't as bad. It didn't feel as bad or as difficult, that's for sure. And yeah, but I also gamed it as best I could. So
I do think that it does read. It reads well. Dickens, he he was an orator. He knew that he would be reading in front of people. And the later you get into his writing career, the more he had that in the back of his mind. And so
I agree.
It just reads.
And
it's fun to read.
He got better. And
the more theatrical the person's willing to be and a little tongue, it's always important to remember that we live post Hemingway, post realism, post all these things that mean that, like, even Shakespeare is a little more cartoonish than our writers today. Right.
Yep.
I don't think most of us would do the wine metaphor, for example, which is a wonderful scene from this book, but it's so.
And so they're just willing to
nose.
give themselves to a sort of theatricality that we think is cheesy today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they wanted there to be some performance and some sort of tongue-in-cheekness to everything, right?
Yeah.
That we take our art more seriously than I think even the Victorians did.
Yeah. I wonder whether the notion of this as being primarily and only for adults existed. In other words, if you're reading it as a family, if you're reading it out loud, do you want to maybe throw in a little bit of something for everybody?
Yeah.
Some comedy, some slapstick for the kids.
Yeah, you probably do. I mean, interestingly, so probably if you're thinking of the Marvel movies, the closest that we have to a Dickensian storyteller would have probably been the Taika Waititi Thor, where he's not unwilling to kind of wink at you in the middle of his story.
That's interesting.
So.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I think this book actually is written better and more in a simple and more clear fashion than many of the Dickens books that precede it. And I think a lot of the little asides are actually good. I wrote one down that I liked. A wonderful fact to reflect on, that every human creature is constituted to be that profound secret and mystery to every other. A solemn consideration when I enter a great city by night, that every one of those darkly clustered houses encloses its own secret, that every room and every one of them encloses its own secret, that every beating heart in the hundreds of thousands of breasts there is, in some of its imaginings, a secret to the heart nearest it. Something of the awfulness, even of death itself, is referable to this. No more can I turn the leaves of this dear book that I have loved and vainly hope in time to read it all. No more can I look into the depths of this unfathomable water, wherein, as momentary light glanced upon it, I have heard glimpses of buried treasure and other things submerged. It was appointed that the book should shut with a spring, forever and ever, when I had read but a page, and it goes on and on. But I mean, that aside is better than
pretty great.
It's pretty great. Yeah. I mean, I only read like half of it, but we had more metaphors to pile on top of that. But there's a lot of good stuff. Oh, and here I wrote down the one that I referenced earlier about Defarge and V. Pross, Dawn of Justice. It was in vain for Madame Defarge to struggle and to strike. Miss Pross, with the vigorous tenacity of love, always so much stronger than hate, clasped her tight and even lifted her from the floor in the struggle that they had. So it's just like, if you were wondering what to think about this, I've got news. Miss Pross, good. Madame Defarge, bad. And speaking of good and bad, the angelic choir is ushering us into the haven of reflection upon deeper meaning.
Well, once again, I think that, as usual, we've kind of touched on this already. Mm-hmm. But I guess the one thing that we haven't really talked about yet is the Sidney Carton. Is what he does. Is that a good thing at the end? For Dickens to hold that up as some
far better thing.
Yeah, as some ideal of heroism, to basically allow himself to be killed in place of this other person. So
it's effective. It got a tear out of Jake.
Yeah.
Old Flint, with heart as dead as a doornail, Jake shed a tear. Oh, I don't know, Jake. You seem like you're the biggest Sidney Carton hater. So you think I don't know. I mean, you could argue what it's gonna inspire young men to think they can lead completely useless lives, and then one act of contrition,
and erase it all and be a hero.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fantasy for a reason, and it's a lazy man's fantasy.
Sidney Carton's the kind of guy that would read for whom Farewell to Arms and get a kick out of it. Like,
right,
man, wouldn't it be fun to have a grand romance with Lucy, and then she dies and the universe screws me over again? Yeah, just like it always does.
Yeah, and so I'm really averse to that sort of thing, and I don't think it's helpful.
I am too, but I think, I don't know, Dickens just needed to rewrite it a little bit. I mean, it was close to being helpful.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I was just thinking, as far as the deeper meaning goes of the book, that's one thing that especially the students pick up on. It's like, well, do we think that what Sidney Carton did was right? And so,
what do your AP students say about it, Brandon?
we pretty much landed where you guys did. If it seems a bit like with Sidney, it's a cheap cop out, but it's effective. So
The character needed to have good and evil striving within him, and then he needed to choose good, as opposed to bad, 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 good.
yeah.
Which is
It's
effectively
like bad, angelic.
yeah. So,
Because I guess the problem that some of them are running into is that Sidney seemed depressive and like he wanted to kill himself the whole book anyways.
Right.
So like, isn't this
This
just
is
Sidney
kind of his
getting what he wanted?
excuse, yeah.
right. Yeah.
And he gets to be a hero in the process.
Yeah, and so isn't that a little bit cheap that
It's
Dickens...
convenient.
Yeah.
It makes me appreciate Dickens' skill, because given how poorly he set everything up, given the unskillful way in which he's balanced things, and as you're describing, he then has to pull this off and make it moving. And so he works his tail off in that chapter where Sidney walks around and sees the town at night and makes his decision. And then he works his tail off in the final scene with the girl that's in line in front of him, and with the final speech. It's far, far better. And it's just like, it actually takes a tremendous amount of skill, given how poorly he's actually piloted this plane, to bring it in for that kind of a landing is really impressive.
Yep.
And so if you want to appreciate Dickens, but also criticize him at the same time and put those two together, you can say, what a genius this man had for making absolutely unplayable, stupid scenes play like magic, and everybody remembers them forever because he's just good.
Yeah.
I mean, that speech just works. It doesn't matter who's saying it. It's a far,
Right.
far better thing I've done. Just has the right cadence to
Yep.
live in our memories and jerk a tear out of us forever.
Yep.
Have you guys noticed that Sidney Carton's kind of a type of Jesus?
Oh my goodness.
I'm guessing that this is something people have written. Has the Gospel Coalition made it there yet?
I just have to imagine some stuff out there in the Christian world. Okay. Haven of Reflection upon Deeper Meaning is closing. Brandon, how many severed heads out of 15 do you give to Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities?
13 and a half.
13 and a half out of, what did I say?
15.
Wow, you're only docking at 1.5 heads.
I think so.
All right. Jake, how many decapitated heads out of 15?
13.
13?
He's only docking at 2 heads.
All right.
How many did you dock it?
1.5.
Oh. Yeah. I live right there with you.
I'm giving it 10. I mean, it's fine. Whatever.
Wow, are you serious?
I don't know. It's good. I liked it. It's not like my favorite book or anything. I don't know. You guys pointed out some real problems with its moral content. I thought it was, yeah. Three ghosts of Brandon will visit me today. All right. That leads us into donor shout outs.
And that was when everything went wrong. When it was over, blood was everywhere, viscera was everywhere. In short, Brandon was everywhere. And Jake, well, I don't even want to describe what happened to him. Or it's possible that Brandon had to go home for a thing, and we thought we'd get to this donor shout out later, but then I got sick, and I'm still pretty sick. And I don't know. You be the judge. You be the judge of what happened. I can't tell you. I can tell you that if you want to be a donor to this program, what you do is you go to patreon.com/thebookening. You sign up for any amount. If you sign up for at least $10 a month, we will shout you out, as I am about to do. And we like to have little gimmicks for these donor shout outs, and they're much better when it's done with all three of us. And I don't know that there's ever actually been a solo donor shout out segment, but I thought, and believe me, we're not going to make a habit of it. The Bookening is back, baby. All three of us in the studio. That's the deal these days. But we are getting an ultra rare solo donor shout out segment right now. So let's get through this together. Teamwork makes the dream work, as we know. So I'm going to tell you the name of the donor, and I'm going to tell you what random word I think of when I see their name. Well, we've got Robert and Rhonda the Lovebirds. They make me think of aquarium. There's Artful Anthony Dodger and Bootstrap Betsy, his beautiful bride. Excuse me. They make me think of trouser. Yeah, I think that feels right, doesn't it? Little Anthony's Cigar Store, of course, a wonderful cigar store in Auburn, Alabama. Parallel satellite. Those would be the two words I think of. A parallel satellite is what I think of for them. The immortal Chelsea E., a lovely longtime listener and supporter. And honestly, when anybody thinks of Chelsea, what they think of is typhomania. I mean, we've all thought it. The delirious state that you have that results from typhus fever. Our next patron, of course, is Jimmy Beam and little Annie Oakley. And a word that they make me think of is legotic, which, as we all know, means having ears like a hare. Not that they have ears like a hare, but when I think of their names, I think of that word. Lily of the Valley would be next. And she makes me think of the word cyanus, which means sky blue. Andrew and Nestor, the Lovebirds, of course, make me think of the word holchy, which means swollen. The Keith Master, one of our great patrons. When you think of the Keith Master, you can't help but think of ethnarchy, a government over an ethnic group. And that leads us right into David's Mighty Men Trucking, which makes me think of furficacious, which means with scales, scaly, like a dragon is very furficacious. Isn't that funny? And John and Jill and little baby Max are next, if you can imagine that. They make me think of the word sable, like an adjective for dark, like a sable color kind of thing. Jay and Katie, who are cold and love cheese, and also C.S. Lewis, including Till We Have Faces. They obviously make me think of the word heteriferous, or ivy-bearing, is what that means. Now, coming up next, we've got Fairy Princess of Wonder and Happiness, my beloved mother Beth. She makes me think of pythonic, which means like an oracle or a python. One of those two things. Consul Prime Adam, of course, is next, and word that he makes me think of is metacaster, which is an old-timey word for a quack or a charlatan. Then you've got Nathan, not me, and the word that he makes me think of is lepidopterology, which I bet some of you, I think I said it wrong, but I bet some of you actually know that one, the study of butterflies. Now, coming up after Consul Prime Adam, we've got Nathan, not me, wonderful old patron. He makes me think of the word catabasis, the decline of a disease in a population. COVID, I suppose, experienced catabasis, or we as population, I don't know exactly how that one works. I don't claim to be an expert. Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith of the Ladies of Justice, of course, make me think of surnominal, which means of, like, or pertaining to surnames. DJ Sammy G, of course, makes me think of gravid, which means pregnant. I don't know why DJ Sammy G makes me think of that, but it's an interesting question. Benny and Dana Tiberius make me think of, excuse me, oh, I am so sorry. Togestology, studying and collecting of beer mats. Eric and Catherine from Yon Window Break make me think of a sibilate, to pronounce with a hiss or sibilant. Professor and Lady X, of course, make me think of majolica, elaborate glazed Italian pottery, as we all know. I'm sorry, I already said them. Lavender's Green Dylan makes me think of astrogeology, the study of extraterrestrial geology, as we all know. Next, we've got Maricheap, and she makes me think of salivation, which is a word for insurrection, like a rebellion. Then we've got the fair and fragrant maiden Chloe. She makes me think of the word astroblame, which means a scar on the Earth's surface from a meteorite impact. Little astroblame, like acne on the face of the Earth. Then you've got Anthony, who's cold and hates life, liberty, and the pursuit of cheese, and also brick red. And it's funny, but he makes me think of nipter, the ecclesiastical ceremony of washing the feet. Isn't that fascinating? By the way, if you've gotten more than three of these, I think that makes you pretty smart. Let's see how many you can get. Jiu-Jitsu Jeffrey, the Texas Ranger, he makes me think of mollicent, or softening. Midnight Ninja Ella, and she makes me think of ratline, a small rope forming a rung or a rope ladder on a ship. Return of the Jedediah makes me think of lunette, a crescent-shaped space where a vault meets a wall. Jay of Rack and Ruin, did I just say him? I'm sorry. Did I mention I'm still sick? He makes me think of mechanology, the study or a treatise concerning opium. I don't know why he makes me think of that. It's not because he's an opium head. Eric and Kate, the Camp Champ Kings, who are warm and love bees. They make me think of mechanology. No, they don't make me think of mechanology. They make me think of caricology, the study of sedges. Matty Matman makes me think of the word atrabiliary, or melancholy, hypochondriac. Sweet Jamie Sunshine makes me think of... Well, I mean, we've all thought this 1,000 times. She makes me think of thalassophobia, the fear of the sea. Tyler, the keeper of eternal darkness, and Lord, the keeper of eternal light. Oh boy, let me tell you, they make me think of Zelatrix, an older nun in charge of disciplining younger nuns. Gotta watch out for that Zelatrix. What about Cold Steel Cody? What word does he make me think of? He makes me think of the word ideaphone, which is a word for words that are used in sound, but not... Oh, wait a second. Is that what ideaphone means? A word that is spoken, but not written, is what it says here. Suffice to say, it looks like it would be really interesting to go into a deep dive on what an ideaphone is, but I don't think we've got time to do that. Because we've got to talk about Jacqueline the Librarian Barbarian, who, of course, makes me think of the word primogeneous, of, like, or pertaining to the earliest or first developmental stage. And John Bombadillo Bombdickety and Captain Tennille, his mate. Anytime I think of them, I think of Libricide, killing or killer of books. Man, the fact that they support this podcast, you would think would get them off the hook for me thinking of that word, associations with them, but there you go. He's a book killer, John Bombadillo. A saxophone Alex, of course. I think of comperendinate, which means to delay or defer. And the other saxophone Alex and Dubstep Danny, when I think of them, I think of symbolatry, undue worship of symbols. I think anyone who's worshiping a symbol is engaging in some symbolatry, undue worship of symbols. What about Ryan, the Terror of Texas, and Eric of the Cream and Crimson, who are no longer stuck in the cold, but please do send cheese? They make me think of the word subintelligitur, which is an implication that is understood, though not stated. Ben Solo and Kylo Ren, I don't even have to say it, but I'll say it just for kicks. Hambo, Swedish folk dance in 3/4 time. Now, John, the Cosmic King of Chaos, he makes me think of Wally Drag, a feeble or worthless person or animal. Ouch, it's not because you're a Wally Drag, John. You just make me think of the word for some reason. Matthew, the Mind Flayer, makes me think of Vespicide, a substance or person who kills wasps. I've certainly been guilty of Vespicide before. Annie, are you okay? Get your gun. Makes me think of onetophobia, the fear of staying single. I have no idea whether Annie has that fear or should have that fear, but I hope she doesn't, and I think she's great. What about Flight of the Valerie? Do I think she's great? I do, mostly because she makes me think of the word tesserotomy, division into 4 parts. And I'll tell you what Thor Ragnajosh makes me think of. He makes me think of the word sacular, which means sack-like. Stephen ... makes me think of iconoduly, which means veneration of icons or images. Peglodon of course, makes me think of the word commenefaction, the act of reminding or admonishing. Like I had to commenefact that person. Christopher the Flower Hulk makes me think of the word agrizoiatry, medicine specializing in wild animal. Lady of the Crystal Lake, our old friend, makes me think of echopraxia, an echo-like repetition of another's actions. An echo-like repetition of another's actions. Ian the Dathomirian, Lord of Death, makes me think of papilionaceous, which means of, like, or pertaining to butterflies. Isn't that interesting? 2 different words for butterflies. Emily H., the Haunter of Dreams. Emily Nightshade, the Haunter of Dreams, I should say. Makes me think of spurion, any hypothetical subatomic particle used to facilitate calculations. All About the Benjamin makes me think of opignorate, which means to pawn. Oh man, you opignorated your grandfather's watch? Who hasn't said that? Mysterious Phantom, he makes me think of Pantarchy, government by all the people, world government. Everybody gets a vote. You get a vote. You get a vote. Jeremy the Dark-Hooded Lord of Death and his brooding bride Maya make me think of herbicide, destruction of a city. That's right. Remains of the J make me think of Drummond, a large sailing ship powered by rowers. Abram the Puller of Teeth, he makes me think of hydrogenic, caused or formed by water. Makes sense for a dentist, I would think. La Morte de Trenton makes me think of plutology, the study of wealth. Very wealthy guy. And then we have Daniel and Jen. I'd like to welcome. We'll save coming up with the true nickname until we've got Jake and Brandon, but I'll start the ball rolling. Maybe this will stick. We'll see. But I'll call you Daniel, a man among men, and Jen, who strikes again every now and then. Everyone strikes again every now and then, but Jen especially. And I'm going to say the word that they both make me think of is hericide, the killing of one's lord or master. I mean, they also make me think of thanatoid, which means apparently dead, deathly, or deadly. And, I mean, it's also true that they make me think of the word suboliferous, which means bearing shoots or suckers. But, yes, that is your donor shout-out. Thank you for listening to this episode. Really looking forward to Moby Dick next month. Thanks for supporting the podcast. Hey, we haven't gotten any new reviews in a while. If you want to go to your podcast app and leave us a review, that helps us out. Joining the Patreon, patreon.com/thebookening helps us out. And sharing your favorite episode with your best friend, that helps us out. Thank you and goodbye.